There we go.
All right.
Welcome to the podcast review show. I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting, and down there's Erik K. Johnson from podcasttalentcoach.com. Erik, who do we have tonight?
Dave, we are joined today by Trent Furyk of Swimming in the Flood podcast. Trent, thanks for being here, bud.
I am so happy to join you, gentlemen.
When did you decide I want to be a podcaster?
I think out of the womb. I just didn't know about the technology at the time. I started just at the beginning of 2019. I was originally thinking it was going to be something more of a video, a Facebook Live or something like that. But I wanted to be able to expand a little bit of the message that I was looking to deliver, and podcasting was the perfect format for it.
Yeah, you've got a great story. You have to go to we'll talk about your website later, but just give us can you give us like a minute version of your story? Cause I met Trent in Boston and he just kind of just blurted this out. And I was like, wait, what?
You did what?
Yeah.
Well, very shortly, I was 15 years ago, I was paralyzed in an accident. I couldn't feel anything from the waist down. Obviously I couldn't walk. And I was lying in the hospital bed, wondering how I was going to live my life. And what's unique about a spinal cord injury is that in 1 second, your life changes and everything you knew is past, and it takes more than you know to start again. And so being here and speaking about resiliency, and I do walk now. And in fact, maybe we'll talk as part of Swimming the Flood. I've done more in my life than just walk, but that's kind of one of the reasons that I look to share my message and use podcasting as a forum for it.
How did you recover and learn how to walk from that accident? Because when I watched it on the website, if I remember correctly, like you got hit by a boat propeller and kind of tore up the side of your body back into those muscles and then into your spinal cord there, which sounds drastic. How do you go from that to walking again?
It was very traumatic. The propeller severed all the major muscles on the left side of my back, carved out 5 pieces of my spine, but it didn't cut into my cord at all.
Oh, wow.
Grace of God is the only way to describe that, right? And so because it skipped that, what the paralysis became was more just the trauma of the event, and it caused a constriction within my spinal column as a protective measure. So It was about a week that I couldn't walk and no sensation. Until that first morning when the doctor came and squeezed my toe, and I said, I felt something there. And everybody's in the room's eyes lit up because that was like great. And it wasn't because they were serving a good breakfast, because they really weren't good, but we were excited. And then it was about a year of rehabilitation with convalescing to get back to the new normal that I have now.
As you were going through that week, did you come to the acceptance that you would never walk again?
Part of me did. And so when I was lying in the hospital bed, and I would say I was certainly crying, in the hospital, when you have a traumatic event, they give you morphine, and it's not to use for pain, because you have plenty of stuff in your body for pain. It's meant to use for anxiety. So like when the doctor comes in and squeezes your toe and you can't feel it.
Right.
Or like when your mother-in-law comes in the room.
I feel that.
And wants to know how you're going to support her. What? So it was there that I decided that I was going to do something different with my life, or I had this new opportunity, and I created this list. And maybe, gentlemen, you've heard of things called bucket lists, right?
Yeah.
And I hate that term because a bucket list implies that you're going to die. And I wanted to create a list of things I was going to do because I was going to live. And so I called this list my coming attractions, things I was going to do because I was going to live. And I put number 1 on the list was to walk, because I thought that was a pretty good place to start.
Good place to start.
I wanted to climb a flight of stairs, lift my children, go back to work, be with my wife, go see the Red Sox. And then I said, I've done all those. Why don't I get a little exotic? And I said, I want to run a marathon. I want to climb a skyscraper. I want to do an Ironman. And the last one, because I'm OCD, can't leave things with just 9. So number 10, I wanted to do an unprecedented swim. And I wasn't quite sure what that was at the time. I wrote on my notes, maybe the channel, but but it turned out to be something quite different than that.
Wow. Amazing.
How old were you when this happened?
I was 35.
And where did you swim?
The first swim I did, I went from Point Judith, Rhode Island, to an island in the Atlantic called Block Island. And it's about 13 or so miles. And I chose to do the swim entirely backstroke as a sign of solidarity for the spinal cord community.
Wow.
And I created a foundation with a group called Rise Above Paralysis. And anybody that's in the New England area that has a spinal cord injury goes to this rehabilitation hospital, Spalding in Boston. And it's a peer mentoring group. And so if, for example, you have a C4 injury, and they will pair you with somebody that has a C4 injury. And so you can speak the same language, so to speak, how to dress, how to clean yourself, how to react to work and the like. And then the magic of this program is after 2 years, they ask you to come back and pay it forward to the next generation of people with spinal cord injuries. And so seeing this group, and the reason I got involved with them, we raised that swim $50,000 to provide durable medical goods for people with new spinal cord injuries.
That's fantastic. So how do we go from there into leadership? And the podcast is all about leadership and helping leaders learn new tactics and skills. How did you make that transition?
It starts with the resilience that's required to overcome an obstacle. And my obstacle was both physical and emotional, which was the paralysis. But I find that there are many managers and people in today's society that have their own paralyzing problems. And what I do is I try to reframe those problems into more simple concepts. And so I take something that might be complex for somebody, and I give them a way to look at it that's kind of simple, breaking it down for them, keeping it simple, stupid, so to speak. And in my role as a chief financial officer, graduate school professor, I've taken that now into businesses and seminars and conferences and the like, and brought that to them. And the podcast was a wonderful vehicle for me to memorialize these concepts that I was training with in corporations or speaking on stages for.
Great. Well, let's go ahead and we're going to play like the first minute or so, basically the opening of the show, and then we'll let you know what our first impression is here. So let me make sure you guys can hear this.
Welcome to Beyond Westworld, and boy, have we got an offering.
That's not your show. Remember how we said there's a
I was like, I love this.
Trent, you're now host of Westworld. Good job.
Perfect. Westworld 1. That's great.
Let's try.
Welcome to Beyond Westworld.
Stop that. I want to not.
Maybe not that one too.
No, hold
Welcome
on.
to Beyond Westworld.
I went.
Deja vu. I think we just heard that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
If I go back,
sounds exciting.
there's the flood. This is the opening clip, is what it says. So that's not you. You know what? I hit that earlier and said, yep, I hear it. That's fine. Let me hear what this sounds like on my computer. It's you. Okay, so all right, that's and let's make sure this is you.
I'm now going to give you my.
So
that is me.
All right, so let me.
Though I didn't know I sounded so tinny.
That was really weird. All right, let me get rid of. I think it's a weird problem with this program where, for whatever reason, I named the file opening for the last time we did the show, and I got really creative and called your file opening. In fact, let me call it opening 2 just to be
Crazy.
Yeah, and I think there's some sort of weird caching issue.
Is there like a Dewey Decimal System to this or something?
It's like, what the heck?
Raise your hand if you know what the Dewey Decimal System is.
Yeah. All right. Edit point 2. All right. And the beginning of the show sounds like this.
Imagine that you are Rory McIlroy, a national treasure, a hero to your hometown, your home country. Crowds cheer your name before you even make your first swing of the day. You acknowledge your fans and set in to perform your assigned task. The last time you played this course, you were masterful, better than masterful. You set the course record. Your chest is swollen to 3 times its size with pride in your abilities. You're on the first tee of Royal Portrush in Northern Ireland, and you just hooked your opening tee shot out of bounds. Then, even worse, slash the next one into hip-high gorse, dashing your chances of winning the Open Championship and crushing the hopes of a nation who waited half a century for this moment. It sounds like a Greek tragedy you may have learned in high school. Welcome to Swimming in the Flood, a podcast where we develop the resilient leader's mindset by navigating difficult currents in business. My name is Trent Furyk.
And then it goes right into stuff. So, Erik, I'll let you start off.
I liked the story. I loved just the vivid way that you told it. You talked about, this is the kind of waist high heather that you'd see Sandy Duncan pitching wheat thins in. I thought the little pieces like that just really made that story come to life. I loved the beginning of it. And typically, I don't like to wonder where we're going with the story. But this story, you told it in such a way where it just sucked me along with it. I thought we needed a little stronger connection between the topic of this particular episode and the story, because we just kind of left Rory hanging there, and then we start talking about hubris and we get into it, and we didn't go back and make that connection to the Rory story as strong as I thought we could have. I didn't feel like you completed that circle for me as I listened to it. I loved the story, and I loved the way you drew it out. If I changed anything about it, I would have changed the way you introduced Rory. You assume everybody knows Rory being a professional golfer, being that he's not as well known as a Tiger Woods or a Jack Nicklaus. I might have suggested that you describe championship golfer Rory McIlroy at the beginning and kind of set that tone for leaders who may not know who he is. I don't expect there to be a great percentage of your audience, being that you're speaking to leaders, and those are the folks who do golf. But there are some fans maybe that don't golf and may not know who he is. So I would have made that connection a little bit, maybe give a little more background on him, and just connected the story to the hubris a little bit more later in the episode. But otherwise, I love how we jump right into, you're on the tee, he shanks his shot. Like the whole description of the story really, really pulled me into the episode. And I love the way it started.
Yeah, I had the same thing. It was kind of like, oh, we're starting off with a story, and the same thing. You're kind of sitting there going, well, wait a minute, what's going to happen next? Which is always the good sign of a good story. So I thought that was well done. The only thing, it's not a very long episode. You kind of come in, that's the one thing I liked about the show, is you kind of come in, you kind of set up your point. Here's what we're talking about. In this case, it was, ask your caddy or pay attention. What's the actual phrase?
Listen to
the caddy. Yeah. And so that was kind of the point. And then the fact that you kind of hit it and quit it, for lack of a better James Brown phrase, about the time. No, it is.
Good.
Here it is. Here's some examples.
It's 15 minutes. It's one point. And, we're not teaching the 10 steps to leadership. You get in, you make your point, and we get out. It's nice, short, consumable episode. I really appreciated that point of it.
My target is certainly to refine to stay right at a 10-minute mark. So it's very that's my objective.
Good.
Who's
the target audience for the show?
So I think it's managers who are on their way to becoming leaders. I think there's a gap between the two. And so I know people that I have that listen to it that fit into that. So it's a harder thing for me, and I'm stuttering here to say I'm at the C-suite level or I'm at the college level. But it's certainly people who have made their way a little bit and need 1 or 2 more points to help them make it a little bit more.
Yeah, they always say it's lonely at the top, because when you're the CEO, you don't have the other CEO that you can commiserate with. It's just you. And so having opportunities like this to learn is incredibly strong. When you come out of that story with Rory and then you introduce the show and you tell them who you are and that you're here to develop the resilient leader's mindset by navigating through difficult currents in business, what I would have liked to have seen right there is today we're going to talk about what? Like that's could have been where you make the connection to the Rory story and the subject matter of today. Give that lesson right up front. Today I want to show you the power of hubris and that we don't know everything. And then, do you continue on with the Rory story after that introduction, or is that where we go into your story of golfing? I can't remember.
I think we go to the next piece.
Yeah. So right there, we could have set up that little nugget of here's how Rory connects to what we're going to talk about today.
Well, that was one of my questions is when you get into the golf story, you say, you start off with, I was golfing in Scotland. That's how you start off that story. And it went on, and later you talk about how the caddy was waiting with the right club and then the guy didn't choose it. Was that you, or were you reading a story that the golfer whose name is escaping me now?
Rory.
No. So when we get out of the opening, I go into explaining what hubris is, because I finished before the opening what or is it Greek tragedy, and I explain what hubris is. I talk about how we learned about it in Odysseus in high school, and then I related it to CEOs, how hubris affects them, and I use some study from University of Missouri to get there. What I attempt to do is I give in each podcast, I give this unscientific, non-peer-reviewed resilient leader theory on, and then it's what the message is, hubris. And that's when I bring out my one point of the day. So this one is trust your caddy. So I'm giving the theory first, the insight first, and then I tell the story about golfing. And I say it's me. It's me. So if I'm not clear on that, then I have to be clear on my storytelling.
I think when you start into that story, you say, I'm on the tee, and
yes.
I wasn't sure if you were in that part of Rory again, or if that was you. That was kind of confusing to me as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I actually thought you were, because you started off talking about Rory. I thought you had like somehow found a story that Rory had written.
That's what I'd felt too.
And you were reading Rory's story, because that was going to be one of my things. I was like, hey, wait a minute. I think you make it sound like it's you golfing, and I was guaranteed you were somehow going back to Rory.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think because the two stories are so similar. I mean, they're both over in Europe, and it's a very similar setting. Like, you're both in trouble. There are a lot of parallels between the two stories, and I think that's kind of what threw me off as well. Because that's the story where you actually talk about the hip high heather, and your caddy goes, "You don't want to do that." And I was like, I've been there. I've been there. Just shut up and give me the club. And you're like, damn it, give me that other club.
That's it. Awesome. All right. Well, here's another kind of in the middle, just a little clip I pulled.
I'm now going to give you my unscientific, non-peer-reviewed resilient leader theory on hubris. Are you ready? Got those pencils out? Okay, here it is. Trust your caddy. You heard it. Trust your caddy. This theory has recently been endorsed by one North Ireland golfer with a big swing and impish good looks. The theory is simple. Here's how it works. Last week, I was competing in a golf tournament in Scotland on a wind-ravished course named Gullen, number 2.
So there were parts of this that I'm going to say about 35% of the way through, my brain went, oh, he's reading this. It went from you talking to me to, okay. And I think part of it is you're a speaker. I mean, that's really, we're here to promote your speaking thing. And I'm like, this is just a tad for me, like, this is almost a performance kind of thing. And I was like, it's just like, okay. And then I was like, all right, well, not a big deal. But that was the only thing to me. I was like, oh, he is definitely reading this. And it's not horrible, because I've heard people that read things that sound like this and it's really bad because they're really monotone. But it was really at times like, holy cow, we are performing. And I was like, you know what? That's how you talk when you're on stage. But I don't know if it would pass what I call the dinner table conversation, where you're sitting around and you're just talking to people. So for me, there were times when it just went, I'm like, oh, it's just a little performingness, if that's even a word. Erik, did you get any kind of vibe like that?
It stuck out to me once or twice.
Yeah.
The reading got a little stiff. It didn't feel like you were quite as comfortable with those passages. But the story was engaging for the most part, and so it didn't bother me as much. Like the whole first Rory McIlroy part, we got through all of that. I was all good with it. You know, I could tell that it was read only because when you're speaking, there's little nuances that you know, the ums and the uhs and the pauses for thoughts when you're coming off the cuff. When it's scripted or well rehearsed and you just rattle right through it, it's the difference between a good actor and an average actor. You know, you can tell the actor's reciting lines, an average actor, if he makes you really believe he's bought in and he's there. That's what makes a great actor. And so there were only a couple times in there where it got a little stiff. But overall, I thought the story was engaging, which made me forget about it. I thought this part right here, where we talk about hubris and the fact that it's common in most leaders, I thought that was a great connection to business. It kind of tied in our story to the business, and you're not the smartest in the room with the caddy. I think listening to that right there, Dave, the part that threw me off, where I couldn't determine whether it was you, Trent, or whether it was Rory, was when you talked about it's been backed by a golfer with impish good looks. And I go, okay, well, Rory's a pretty good looking guy. Yeah. Okay. So that's what made me think it was Rory. I mean, it was almost, you know, I understand what you're doing now, having listened to the story and about halfway through when I realized, oh, wait a minute, that's Trent golfing. That's not Rory. That's where it made the connection. But I think that part up there is what threw me off.
Yeah. When I listened to that, I'm like, oh, that's where I made the connection. Cause that's where, it's been thing. And I thought that was kind of his way of introducing.
And I think the reason is, Trent, I know what Rory looks like. I don't know what you look like, you know, when I'm listening to the podcast,
right.
You know, so I think that's where, you know, you said that line in a way which led me to believe I know what the person you're referring to looks like. And because I didn't know what you looked like at the time, and I did know what Rory looked like, that's what made me believe it was him.
Okay.
It could be. And then I had to have this clip just because it's a great Clint Eastwood imitation.
I know it's Dirty Harry, and he thinks this way about my humorous.
Man's got to know his limitations.
A man's got to know his limitations.
And the thing I wanted to point, I don't have you doing it. I cut it short.
So Dave, you thought that was an impersonation? That's straight out of the movie. That's a movie clip.
I know, but I think later, don't you say, man's got to know? And I cut that out.
Yeah.
But there is one problem with that clip, and it's not, again, these aren't huge things, is the fact that there are times in your podcast, let me share my screen here real quick, that your audio is a little on the quiet side. What I have for you listening at home, on the left-hand side of the screen, I have your actual audio, and the little lines you see there are that little line is -6, and it's weird in audio because you want to go up to 0. In fact, you don't want to go over 0. You want to get as close to 0 as you can. So I always tell people your lowest level should be about -6. Probably go up to -12 would keep you safe. And anything above that, I know some people like shoot for -3. And the problem with -3 is it's really easy to go over 0. And when you do that, you distort and there's no way to make it sound good. So in this case, the problem is the highest you get is -6. And so when you played that clip, the first time I was walking around outside, it actually really had to strain to hear Clint Eastwood, because if I had that little clip, you could see where it's really the line gets very, very small when you play that. So what I did is on the right hand side, there's a really great tool called Auphonic. It's AUPHONIC. I think you get 3 hours for free a month, and you can basically just run your audio through this, and it automatically adjusts the volume level. And so you'll see on the right where now about the lowest the audio gets is -6, and it is going up to like -12 and -3. So it wasn't something that I couldn't hear. I've had podcasts where if I listen outside, I'm like, I can't hear it. I'm in my earbuds are jacked up as loud as I can get. It wasn't that bad, but it was something I noticed the minute it came on. I had to grab my volume knob, and I was like, oh, okay, well, not a big deal. But there were times, and it's interesting because you're a speaker, and speakers know how to use dynamics. And so there are times when you want to get quiet. And then there are times when you really want to, you should have heard the words coming out of my mouth on the golf course, and that's fine. But it was just one of those things that, especially for me, the Clint Eastwood one, I was like, that was officially, I think, a little too quiet. And again, it was a half a second clip. So it's not, again, it didn't ruin the podcast, but I was just like, and then I pulled up your audio, and I'm like, this whole thing's just a tad, it could have been, 3 decibels louder, and you would have been, right where I usually recommend people to get. So it's just I'm kind of nitpicking, but it was just a little quiet.
I love the fact that you included the Clint Eastwood clip because it adds a little more showbiz to the podcast. It adds another layer of depth to the content, and I thought that was pretty cool. I appreciated the extra work that you went into adding that to it.
Yeah, and again, I'm seriously bummed that I didn't that I cut out your imitation. It was great.
Do you want to hear it again, Dave?
Do you feel lucky?
Got to know his limitations.
And then the other thing that for me kind of just I went, oh wow, okay, was you were talking about the golf story, and then like just ran right into, folks, that's it for the end of the show. And so I'm going to play the end of the show, but we're going to hear that transition. And because you were telling a story and you're doing something and you said, folks, and I was like, I was waiting for your next point. Like, and folks, that's why you've got to listen to your caddy. And instead it was like, folks, that's the end of the show. And I was like, still like, for me, I was like knee deep in story. And then all of a sudden you went, wham, we're done. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. So the story's over. So I guess that's the point. There wasn't, well, you'll hear the story ends really abruptly in my opinion.
Caleb, hand me the wedge. Folks, thank you for listening to Swimming the Flood. Resilient leaders face challenging currents, and it's tough navigating. But with one tack or another, we can get there together. You can find more podcasts and videos on my website at TrentFuryk.com. If you enjoyed today's show, please tell a friend. Share the link on your social media. Subscribe. I spent some time last week training a graduate school that was going through organizational change. It was just a few ideas on how to better manage their workload. If your organization could use some outside assistance, just write to me at info@TrentFuryk.com. Send me a quick message if you have an idea that needs to be looked at through a resilient leader's lens. Folks, thanks again for listening. I look forward to getting together next week. See ya.
And I just noticed listening to this, he does the thing that we all do. Let me see if I can restart this. When you say the name of your show, you say it really fast.
Caleb, hand me the wedge. Folks, thank you for listening to Swimming the Flood.
Swimming in flood.
Whoa, okay.
And it's one of those things. Erik has the best line ever on this. Say the name of your podcast like you're saying something important. And it's because I think it's our brain that when we come to promoting ourselves, we're kind of like, yeah, it's just me, whatever. And so many people, I do a thing on my show where once a month, I have my audience chime in on an answer. And I'm here to tell you, everybody says, this is Dave Jackson for the Podcast Review Show. It's like they're trying to win a contest when they say the name of their show. So, but can you see kind of where it's like, hand me the wrench, and then it was like, folks, wham, and I was like, oh.
Well, I certainly there are two things I can take there. One is I want to be respectful of the time frame that I'm trying to build here. And I know podcasts can go on like Dan Carlin for forever.
6 hours. Yeah.
By the way, thank you for turning me on to him. I'm on episode 48 right now, since we met in January. But I'm trying to keep into that 10-minute so people can know what they're going to expect for a little bit, because I could ramble. And but I appreciate that. I certainly need to close the story and wind it down as opposed to sever it off.
Yeah.
In storytelling, a lot of stories end with something like that, movies or things like that. It's, no longer do we end a movie with the big scripty, the end, like we did back in the 40s. I don't necessarily have a problem with the way you ended the story. It just a little longer gap between hand me the wedge.
Oh, yeah, okay.
A pause, a beat, give me another beat in there, and then say, thanks for being here this week. I really hope you took a little something out of the story we shared, and then get into your close.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily have a problem with the way the story ends. It's the way the story ends and crashes into your close.
Mm-hmm.
Bingo.
It's like all of a sudden the commercials popped on right at the end, and you're like, wait a minute, was that really the end? It's like the end of The Sopranos. You're like, hold on a minute, what just happened?
Right. Don't stop believing.
Right. So through this entire episode, you do a fantastic job talking directly to me one-on-one. When you're a leader and you're doing that, you're not the smartest person in the room, and you're talking to me in a one-on-one conversation. We get here to the end, and all of a sudden you start talking to folks. You start talking to this group. And I'm not listening to your show as a group. I'm listening in my earbuds, just you and me one-on-one, having a conversation, very personal conversation. So avoid that group speak at the end. It's like when you're on stage and you're talking to a group of 500, you want to make a connection with that guy sitting in row 6, and you want to make him feel like you're talking directly to him and you're having a conversation with him. And he's like, preach on, Trent, I'm right there with you. Right. But if you're talking to the group, you're not making that one-on-one connection like you would. So whether your audience is 5 or 500, make that personal connection. And when you take out those group speak words, that will help you do that.
Sure.
At the very end of the show, you say, see ya. I mean, that felt like, to me, you were talking right to me. Hey, see ya next week.
And then the other thing,
I'll be here.
The other thing I wanted to point out, Erik, what is the email that you give out at the end of your show?
The email I give out at the end of my show is, hey, if you want to reach me, it's all over at podcasttalentcoach.com.
But it's coach at Podcast Talent Coach, right?
Yes,
it's not. And why isn't it Erik?
Because 2 reasons. 1, I want to brand myself as the coach, and 2, I don't want everybody emailing my personal email address. I want everybody going through the coach email address.
See, I thought it was because the only reason I remember that your name is spelled with a K.
Oh, yes.
Is because it's Erik K. Johnson.
And that's why the K is there.
Yeah. And I bring that up because you said, just go to Trent Furyk. And I was in my kitchen and I'm like, okay, THE.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody's told you, Trent, but Furyk is that the common spelling, or is that the other spelling? Like, it's like, you might want to help a brother out when I'm trying to go to TrentFuryk.com.
Okay.
Yeah. And you might even
I'm going to just change my name to Stan Lee.
Stan Lee. Well, there you go. See, now that's you might screw everybody up. Is there a Y or not? Come on.
Well, I was thinking, not because your website, we're going to get to that in a second, is great, but everybody knows how to spell swimming in the flood. And I thought you might buy that domain if it's available, and then just email me, Trent at swimmingintheflood.com. You can get an email address that then forwards to your real email address. That might be something you do just to keep in the brand and that whole 9 yards. But my guess is you did not make this website yourself unless you're a web designer.
I did not.
Yeah, because your website is when I went to this and I'm like, well, not really whole much I can find here to pick apart. It's beautiful. It's the thing I love about it is when you go right to it. And again, it's just Trent Furyk. How do you say your name again?
Well, let's go with The Rocks right now.
The Rocks. Yes. So it's THEROUX.
Yes.
And you've got it right there at the top, developing resilient leaders, develop tomorrow's resilient leaders today. So right there, your message is just smacking my face as soon as I go there. And it's got a lot of nice white space. You've got really good photography in it. You've got a video on the front. I mean, really, I just kind of looked at it and was like, yeah, that's good. And that's good. And then you've got all these things at the bottom where you've been on all these different networks and you've been on TV and just more in terms of really positioning you as like, wow, this guy's legit. That's really what your website just screams. Wow, this guy's legit.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was great. And then you've got the videos, and I love the fact that you've got a keynotes link at the top. So right there, we kind of know, oh, this guy's a speaker, because if you're not a speaker, you don't have keynotes and you know what kind of speaker you are. You're a keynote speaker. And then you've got, when you go to the about page, I think this is the one where, what is the who's the superhero with the cutlery? There's somewhere on your website where there's a picture of you in your back. Wolverine.
Oh, yeah, you can. Well, Wolverine's he's got the knives. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
the
it's
cutlery.
Yeah,
Eyebrow comic book here.
Yeah. But I forget, somewhere on here you actually have the picture of your back, and I was like, holy moly.
Yeah, it's one of the pictures. It's in one of the videos.
Yeah, that's it. It's in one of your videos, and I saw that. And I was like, oh my goodness. So, Erik, did you have any? I was kind of like, well, you got a search box, you got you've got a pod. Oh, that would be one thing I would say. And again, this is nitpicking, is number one, you've done a great job when you go to the episodes. You've got the player right at the top, and you're using Libsyn, which of course I work there, so I think that's great. But you also have done your homework, and all the buttons are there on your player. A lot of people don't do that, although I don't see Apple. Oh. I don't see Apple or Google for that matter. But what I would also do is maybe at the bottom, because you've got, again, this is great for Google Juice. You've got basically a transcript of the podcast. I might put links at the bottom, because now that they've consumed the content, if you say, hey, if you want more of this, click here to subscribe. Mm-hmm. Because not everybody is going to know that you need to click on this little button to do that. But I really couldn't find much. I was just like, wow, this is a really good website. Erik, any thoughts on his website?
I thought the website really made you look legit. When I got on it, I was like, wow, how am I gonna pick this apart? Because this is fantastic. The website looks great. I actually, when I originally wrote my notes, I said, well, nothing to change here.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, that's not going to help anybody. So I dug and tried to find something to change. And I found two things, Trent, that I would recommend that you change. I went back and I looked at your the sheet that you submitted to us. And, your goal is to get more speaking opportunities. And when I go to your website, I can't find a button that says book Trent. The only thing I could find was about 3/4 of the way down. There was a small line of text that said, keep going down, keep going down. Right here, right under his picture there, it says, what's that say? Book
Trent for an engaging talk on employee resilience.
Shoo. I mean, that's small. If you want, if you're a speaker, and that's what this whole page is designed to be, is like, book me to come speak to your organization. Somewhere up top above the fold, I would have a big old thing that says book Trent.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, make it clear, because you can go to the about page. Like if you go to contact us, click on the contact page. This pulls up a nice box I can fill in. And if I scroll down a little bit, it says, what am I looking for? Speaking opportunities, podcast opportunities. I can, if I dig hard enough, I can find it, but let's make it easy for people. Like one click and we're done. Sure. The only other thing I would change is, when I asked you when we first got on the call tonight, is the podcast called Swimming in the Flood. Because when I go to the podcast page and I look on it, the episode we listen to is titled Swimming in the Flood, but none of these others on here say Swimming in the Flood anywhere, which confused me as to if the show was called that, or maybe it was just this particular episode.
It's funny. Well, there's the episode name with the number below it, and you're right. And I just recently in the last month changed because I had see this picture you're looking at right there, Dave, the swimming in the flood, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what goes up on Apple and Google and when you Spotify, right? But the developer had suggested to me what we need is something more keywords, and I use these next ones. So if you look to the one to the right of it, I'll use that box or that phrase as an insight tip that I push out for promotional. And then I say, oh, this is my insight of the week, and you can find more information. You can come to click, send people back here. So I'm trying to tie that together, and I use that for newsletter as well.
Yep, I don't have a problem with that. But if we scroll all the way up to the top of this page, Dave, which is the podcast page, like the only place it says swimming in the flood is in the description. I would put swimming in the flood above it in the big bold headline one there where it says podcast. Yeah. I would put that swimming in the flood. And then in the description, I would put a podcast with Trent Furyk, implement resilient leadership in everything you do.
I got you. Yeah.
Just so there's a little more billboard. Now, again, Trent, I had to search for something not right with this website, and it was difficult to find. Those are the only two things I could come up with because your website is phenomenal. And I love the picture of you. I don't know how you got somebody to get that photo of you in the pool, but man, the glare and everything in that photo just says badass and like let's book you to speak today. I like it.
Thank you so much.
The other thing I forgot to mention before that I thought you just did a great job of was at the end, you said, I was speaking with somebody such and such. And it was, obviously you're letting people know you speak, but it wasn't like I don't know. It was you, again, you were just talking to me. I was at a place and we're talking about such and such and such. And if you need help with that, and I just love the fact that it was such a low pressure and the fact that, if I hadn't figured it out yet, you're a speaker. And I hear a lot of speakers that start podcasts and they forget to mention, oh, by the way, I speak to people. And I just thought it was a nice pitch without being a giant pitch. And, it was quick and to the point. And it was like, hey, here's what I do. I was talking to these people. If you need something like this, go to the website. So instead of doing a big, long, drawn out, this is, I walked to, I'm so great. This is why I'm great. This is why you should book me. Like, hey, if you want more information, go to the website. So that was something I thought, again, it was really just talking to the you're talking to me again. And then like Erik said, I like the fact that it was like, oh yeah, I'll see you next week. See you. So that was something else I did really good.
So thank you. When I was listening to you present, Dave, how does 10 minutes, 10, 11 minutes fit in Libsyn's world for ideal podcast time, which I think you had said was 25 to 35 minutes.
Yeah, right now they just came out. Edison Research and Triton Digital came out with this big study that it's not the share of or maybe it is. Anyway, the average podcast listener listens to 6 podcasts a week. The average listening time is 6 hours and some change, which makes you think they're listening to an hour-long podcast. So I always quote Valerie Geller. She has a book called Beyond Powerful Radio that says there is no such thing as too long, only too boring. So if you're shooting for CEOs, those guys are busy. 10 minutes might be perfect for them. A busy mom. And it also depends too sometimes what your show, like what's the goal of it? I used to listen, I can't remember the name of the show, but I can remember the agency was the Association of Christian Athletes. And they did a show every day that was about 2 minutes long. And it was like, did you know that eating carrots is good for you? Blah, 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 blah. Carrots, 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 the Association of Christian Athletes. So I remember that because that's all they were doing was building their brand in my head so that if I wanted to go find something about health or whatever, I could do that. So I've seen people do that. I just want to reinforce my brand. And then other people, if you want to kind of strut your look at how much I know, well, then they'll do a deep dive and they'll do a 40-minute podcast and really kind of show what they want to do. Yeah, Erik, what do you think when it comes to length?
When it comes to length, I think it's all about your brand. Like when I tell you Dan Carlin has another podcast that he's published of hardcore history, and you go fantastic, and you go over to listen to it and it's 12 minutes long, what would you think?
I'd be disappointed. Yeah.
What the hell happened? Right.
Yeah.
But if I say, hey, Trent has a brand new podcast out. He just put out a new episode. Go check it out. And you go listen to it and it's 2 hours long. You would say, Trent, what the hell are you doing? Right. It's consistent, because if you're talking to CEOs and they go, you know what, I'm going to go on my power walk here over lunch. I got about 10 minutes. Perfect. I'm going to pop Trent's podcast on because I know it's 10 minutes. So it doesn't matter if it's 10 minutes or 30 minutes or 2 hours, as long as it's consistent and people get what they expect. Now, does that mean you can't break the rules? Absolutely not. You know, Dave's podcast, I know if I listen to Dave, it's going to be about an hour. But there are podcasts that Dave has done that have been an hour 30, hour 45. But at the beginning, Dave goes, hey, we're going to go a little long today because I got some stuff to talk about, and it's going to take me a while to get through it. And I go, oh, okay. So I know this isn't a longer episode. But I know for the most part, it's going to take me 2 listens to get through Dave's podcast. I'm going to listen to half of it going to work and the rest of it coming back home. You know, so I know.
Sure.
But so as long as it's consistent, I don't think there's a right length. It's a consistent length.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have one more question. The format that I use is and so this was episode 20, and I've doubled that now. And so I've fallen to a rhythm of where I have a business problem, I have a corporate story that fits that business problem, and then a humorous anecdote that I try to wrap that in. So I try to. That's my format, we'll call it. Any thoughts about should more on one, less on another? You know audiences far better than I do. My audience is modest, we'll say.
Having not heard the content, I can't comment more on one, less on another. With regard to the framework, I like the consistency of that. I like being able to know that you're going to frame the problem for me. You're going to give me a business example of it, and then you're going to give me a personal example of it to really bring it home. I like that sort of format. I know what I'm going to get. I like to be consistent. You know, when I tune on to Jimmy Fallon, you know, I like to know I'm going to get the monologue, and then I'm going to get a funny skit, and then I'm going to get 2 guests, and then I'm going to get a musical guest, and then we're going home. You know, if we came on and all of a sudden we had half an hour of a monologue and 1 guest and no musical guest, I'm like, what just happened to the show? Like it went out the window. So I like that consistency. People are creatures of habit. So when you create that framework that can be predictable, and then you fill it up with unpredictability, that's when you get great content, because
Sure.
people know what they're going to get, but there's still an element of surprise by what you fill it in with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How do you gentlemen build your audiences?
How do we build them?
Yes.
One download at a time.
No, you didn't say that. No, it's just, beat me to it. Yes. It's like multiple streams of income. You build multiple streams of guests. You appear on other shows. You get guests to appear on your shows and get them to share the content. You go create community online. You go create community in real life at conferences. You connect with people. You share. You give. You offer, and you deliver great content on a consistent basis that people can recommend. Because if I say Trent puts out a great podcast, you ought to go check it out, but Trent's gone 3 weeks without putting out a new episode, people are going to go, what? This guy hasn't published in 3 weeks. Like, why am I coming to check this out?
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm a little skeptical of whether or not I should be recommending your show. So if you're putting out consistent content on a regular basis and it's quality, and then you get people to talk about it, that you just build it slowly. A lot of people think there's a magic button where all of a sudden your audience just shows up.
Yes.
If it were that easy, everybody would be doing it.
Sure.
And they would do it on a regular basis, but we become special by the content we provide. You tell great stories on your episodes. Your episodes are a consistent length with a consistent format, and you give CEOs and leaders useful information. Now it's just a matter of marketing your brand. Creating the podcast is 20% of the work. Marketing is the other 80. Spend 80% of your time just getting your name out there and be consistent with it.
And you did it at the end of your show. You're like, hey, if you like the show, like tell somebody, would you? Like leave me a review, things like that. That really, it sounds silly, but so many people don't say, can you go tell somebody about the show? Because that's really, Jacobs Media came out with a thing last year, and they said podcast growth is 70% word of mouth. And I think about it, most of the podcasts most of the new podcasts I listen to, it's because I've heard more than one person say, hey, you do this thing. Have you heard such and such?
And
Like
but word of mouth, Dave, word of mouth isn't just me telling you about it. It's hearing it on another podcast. It's hearing it. You know, if your favorite podcaster mentions that I listen to a podcast, I go check it out. You know, if I'm listening to Dave and Dave goes, I just heard another great podcast. It's called Yada Yada. I trust Dave. I'm going to go check it out. Yeah. So it's social media from your friends. It's another podcast from your friends. It's actually talking to your friends. It's seeing it mentioned in an article. It's people that you trust making reference to the show. And when you can get other people to talk about your show by doing something remarkable, then that's when you win. I'm of the belief that ratings and reviews don't do a whole lot because you don't know those people. You know, when I go on and I look at a restaurant rating and I see it's got 7 people rated it and they all rated it 5s, I'm going, well, yeah, that's his mom, that's his sister, that's his. I don't believe any of that crap. And, you know, unless I know the person, I'm not taking the recommendation.
Sure.
So I think you should spend less of your time on ratings and reviews and more of your time on the, hey, go tell somebody about it. If you found this helpful, if you love this, tell a buddy, bring them along, more the merrier.
Sure.
Yeah. And I don't know if there are any kind of, well, especially right now, but let's pretend things were normal. If there are any kind of events where your target audience is going to hang out, if there's an event for CEOs or, you know, I mean, that's why I met Trent speaking at an event for speakers. And I was like, well, every speaker needs a podcast. So that's where I went. And I've gone to events for authors because authors want exposure for their books. And, you know, so I'm always going to wherever people want exposure and they want to get more of their community and their tribe or whatever you're calling it this week. And so I just go where they are. And it literally is, you know, okay. I remember once I went to a thing at the library. It was all about SEO. And I'm like, well, people that want SEO are trying to get more people to their website. And all I did is at the end, they said, does anybody have any questions? And I said, yes. I said, my name's Dave Jackson. I'm from the school of podcasting.com. And I know a lot of people have questions about transcripts. And I asked a question about transcripts, but that's all I said. That was the only marketing I did. I'm Dave Jackson from the school of I had 5 people at the end go, did you say you do podcasting? Huh. And it was just, so, you know, there were, I don't know, 35 people there, but I got 5 to ask me and I gave them a card. So it's just one of those things where I wish it was, you know, I'm looking, to me, it's gold plated and it's about 6 feet tall and it's a big giant switch that I could just, you know, and 10,000 downloads come from heaven. But I just haven't found it yet.
Erik, has anybody told you, or I'm going to say it this way, you resemble Les Nessman?
Les Nessman, no, probably because of the glasses.
WKRP has me thinking you're dropping turkeys out of a.
So my hair's much shorter now, but when it was longer, it was David Spade, David Caruso, or Michael, what's his bucket from 16 Candles and all of those films.
Oh,
so you're going with the heroes, I see.
Yeah, I got the good guys.
That's it.
David Caruso, I'll take.
Yeah. Any other questions for us?
No, gentlemen, this has been fantastic, and I appreciate all the comments, the ones that make me feel good, and the ones that make me feel I have to go back and work a little harder.
You have a great show, Trent. I enjoyed listening to it. It was a lot of fun. You're a great storyteller. I love the way you write it. Tell me a little bit more. Be a little more natural and relaxed. But your show's money. Keep it up. Love it.
Thanks. I hope you both subscribe.
Absolutely.
You can find me at schoolofpodcasting.com. You can find Erik at podcasttalentcoach.com. You can find Trent at trenttheroux.com. How's that? I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. And definitely watch the video. when you go to Trent's website. That's amazing. And you can also see him, and he's a great speaker. That's the other thing, that your video does a really good job. And you see you going from kind of smaller, where you're talking, I think in some cases with, was it Boy Scouts or something like that? Or there was a group of kids, and then there was a big group, and it was like, wow, he's just all over the place. So I thought that was great. And if you're looking, Trent's got the seat all warmed up. You can come visit us at podcastreviewshow.com and click on the review button. And Trent didn't cry. We still were waiting for that first person to just bust into tears. But thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you again real soon with another episode of the Podcast Review Show.
Thank you.